Hello, and welcome to another sacred cow mutilating episode of This Ain't No Game. Now, we've been doing this TANG thing for a while, and we've seen some real corkers, but we've thus far avoided any of Uwe Boll's remarkable contributions to the world of very, truly, bracingly awful cinema. This is partly by design. My original plan for TANG was that I'd start with the slightly less terrible video game movies and then work my way down from there, as to not overly taint my palate for awfulness. But that all ends right here and now with Postal, an ugly, manic, desperate movie that operates under the profoundly misguided notion that taking down tired, low-culture targets and breaking obvious taboos in the most tasteless and juvenile ways possible is a suitable substitute for actual humor. In this way, Uwe Boll's Postal is a perfect complement to the games that it's based on. The driving force behind developer Running with Scissors' Postal series has largely been a nasty compulsion to be as crass and shocking as possible, taking on such soft, shop-worn targets as terrorism, religious cults, the government, Middle Eastern convenience store owners, trailer trash, and Gary Coleman. Like the games, there's no insight or perspective being offered by Postal, just a constant stream of ugly stereotypes and what's in the news these days gags. The movie loosely follows a terrible day in the life of a put-upon-everyman character that, like in the games, is known only as Postal Dude. The movie spends the first half hour subjecting Postal Dude, who TANG viewers may recognize as the canine-catching Russian STARS member from Resident Evil Apocalypse, to one grotesque humiliation after another, starting off with the shrill emasculations of his unfaithful and morbidly obese, trailer-bound wife, to a demoralizing and bizarre corporate job interview.
What is the difference between a duck?
As it pummels both the lead character and the audience, Postal finds time to take on such hot-button topics as the driving abilities of elderly Asian women, indecisive coffee shop customers, and the quality of service offered at the welfare office, and the less than righteous motivations of terrorists. It doesn't help that every single character in Postal exists as a broad caricature that is as stupid as it is spiteful, but the underlying problem is that, for as callous and sophomoric as Postal is, it consistently goes for the laziest possible jokes with its touchy subjects. When Postal Dude walks in on his wife cheating on him with his yellow-toothed redneck neighbor, he's literally rolling her in flour to find the wet spot. I mean, fuck. Jesus Christ. There are occasional jokes that might have worked as quick throwaway gags, but the movie instead chooses to belabor them to oblivion. In Postal's most self-reflexive and self-indulgent moment, Uwe Boll actually shows up as himself, talking about how his movies are funded by Nazi gold and commenting on how being around children makes him horny.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Only to be attacked by Vince Desi, the head of Running with Scissors, for turning his terrible game into this terrible movie before being shot in the crotch and declaring directly into the camera, "I hate video games." It's such a dizzyingly absurd and self-referential string of events that, on paper, it could have been pretty funny. But in the hands of Uwe Boll, it just flops around and suffocates like a dying fish. Postal is so consistently foul that whenever someone I recognized showed up, I just kind of felt bad for him. The usually enjoyable, barky J.K. Simmons shows up briefly as a sidewalk conspiracy theorist, though the only indignity that he's subjected to is being blown into red goop by a suicide bomber. Vern Troyer shows up for a while as himself, just long enough to get paid in what are implied to be the gold teeth of concentration camp victims, get locked up in a suitcase full of dildos, and then raped by 1,000 monkeys.
Which is monkeys? I don't fucking know. I got nothing to do with this shit.
I am literally not exaggerating any of this. The biggest bummer in Postal, though, is the involvement of former Kid in the Hall Dave Foley, who plays a disingenuous religious cult leader with a penchant for loose women and weed. The Kids in the Hall holds a pretty special place in my heart, and while Foley's stock has definitely diminished in the years since, it's kind of tragic to see him stooping to extended scenes of full frontal nudity and bad poop jokes. Sadly, Postal is actually at its best when it's being crude and transgressive as often and as aimlessly as possible. It's something the movie loses sight of somewhere around the hour mark when it gets caught up in the grinding gears of its own plot machinations concerning two rival plans to use a batch of Tickle Me Elmo-style rare nutsack-shaped dolls filled with the avian bird flu to bring about the end of the world. The movie's tedious attempt to try and tell some kind of story doesn't stop it from indulging in the occasional ugliness, though at a point its random violence and gay panic becomes kind of non-sequitorial.
I'm fucking gay!
Considering the creative forces involved, my expectations for Postal weren't particularly high, but it still managed to consistently undercut them at every turn. It's got the amateurish feel of a trauma movie, but without any of Lloyd Kaufman's twisted enthusiasm, and its desperate attempts to provoke for provocation's sake make Postal's sneering shockbait of the worst kind. Hello and welcome to another dusty... I fucking swear to God, if you put me in this movie.
Gotta find the wet spout.
And that, I'm pleased to say, is going to do it for this week's episode of This Ain't No Game. I'm Ryan Davis, reminding you that Hitler equals comedy. Would like a 15-year-old Howard Stern write this?
So you loved it.